Hey there, welcome to Geeky Greenhouse. In this video, I'll show you when to harvest your snap peas from the garden. Peas are some of the earliest crops that we get to harvest out of our garden, but it's important to get the timing right to make sure that you're getting the most out of your plants. So in this video, I'll show you the simple technique to know exactly when to harvest your peas from the garden, regardless of what type of pea you're growing. There are three main types of peas, including shelling peas, which have a very tough, fibrous pod that's not really edible. Then you have snow peas, which have a very thin pod with small peas inside, which are fully edible. And then our favorite, which we have growing here, snap peas, specifically sugar snap peas, which are fully edible and very plump and thick. But again, the principles of knowing when to harvest your peas are the same regardless of the type you're growing. So when do you harvest your peas? It's really simple. You simply wait for the pods to thicken up and become plump and harvest them right away after that happens. It's very important to harvest your peas promptly after they become thick, because if you wait a little too long, even sugar snap peas can become fibrous and tough and overall less appetizing. It's also important to stay on top of harvesting because you'll get more out of your plants if you harvest regularly when the plants are producing prolifically. It is okay to harvest them a little bit early. They may be slightly bitter and the peas of course will be smaller, but they should be nice and tender, and I've found that they're usually pretty tasty anyway. So as soon as you start to have peas ready to harvest, you want to harvest them right away. That will encourage the plant to put more energy back into flowering again and producing more peas. Snow peas can be a little bit trickier to know exactly when to harvest because they're not nearly as thick as snap peas or shelling peas, but they still do thicken up as they mature, so you want to try to catch them just as they're reaching that perfect thickness just after they begin to plump up. So you've found some peas that are ready for harvest. Now, how do you do it without damaging the plant? It's pretty easy to break some branches and rip the tendrils off of your trellis or whatever the peas are climbing on. So I like to grab the pea with one hand and use the other hand to hold the branch it's attached to and simply pull them apart. The pea should detach right at its tip. You may get the flower petals along with it, and that's totally fine, but you don't want to break off too much of the connecting branch from the pea. Before you eat your peas or cook with them, I like to remove the stringy, fibrous piece along the edge of the pea because it can be sort of chewy and hard to eat. That way you get a nice, crunchy and tender texture. Now, you may have noticed that we're growing our peas on this trellis here, and it can be tricky to know exactly where to put your peas because they need to climb up something. So if you've ever struggled to plan out your raised bed gardens, we have a great guide on our website, which I'll link down below, where you can get some starting points, some great ideas on what to plant in your raised beds and where. We have a great mixed vegetable and flower plan, which you'll find on that page, and it can act as sort of a great starting point where you can swap out some of your favorite veggies to get the perfect garden for you. Again, I'll leave that link down below. Now, there are two situations where you might want to adjust when and how you're harvesting your peas, and the first of which is if you want to save your seeds to plant again next season. To save pea seeds from your plant, you need to wait for the pods to fully ripen and begin drying on the plant before you harvest them. This can be weeks, even a month or longer after you would normally harvest your peas. And what this does is ensures that the peas are fully mature and that the seeds inside are going to be viable and will actually sprout when you plant them. Now, it's really important to do this later in the season after you've gotten a lot of harvests off of your plant. Wait until the productivity starts to die down on the plant and then let some of your peas mature to save the seeds. Otherwise, if you allow some of your peas to mature too early in the season, that might actually cause the plant to slow down production before you want it to, thereby reducing your overall yield. So make sure you do this at the tail end of the season when the plants are starting to slow down anyway. You've already got some harvests, and those last few peas that you get can be your seed savers. The other situation where you might want to harvest your peas in a different manner is if you want to use pea plants to add nitrogen to the soil. Legume plants, including peas, have the ability to add nitrogen back to the soil. It's called nitrogen fixation, and that's what makes peas one of the greatest companion plants for your vegetable garden because essentially they can act as a fertilizer. However, this doesn't just happen naturally. The first thing you have to do is make sure that the beneficial bacteria that works with pea plants to add nitrogen is actually present in your garden. So you can buy an inoculant, it's very cheap, and you can basically dip your seeds in that inoculant right before planting. That way you know that beneficial bacteria that's necessary for nitrogen fixation is there. The second thing you need to do is harvest the plants properly. And in this case, you're not going to get any peas off of your plant. You're purely using it to fix nitrogen into the soil. And so instead of waiting for the peas to develop, you'll actually cut off the plant at its base without removing the root system from the ground, just around when the plant begins to flower. This is because the plants are most active in their nitrogen fixation process before they begin to fruit. Once they begin to produce seed pods, they're going to shift energy away from adding nitrogen to the root systems and towards seed production. Now, it's not to say you're not going to get any nitrogen fixation if you wait for the plants to fruit, but you may get less, and ultimately the goal is to get as much nitrogen into the soil when using peas as a companion plant. One last thing on the topic of peas, they tend to slow down production sometime around early to mid-summer, so it's a great idea to cut them off at their base and plant something else in their place that likes to climb, like cucumbers, and that's exactly what we'll be doing in this garden this year. So if you want to follow along and see us grow some cucumbers up this same trellis, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. In the meantime, we have some great articles over on our website about growing cucumbers and getting the most out of your plants, so I'll leave some links down below as well. Thanks so much for watching Geeky Greenhouse, and I'll see you next time.